From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Thursday, October the 22nd, 2020. We open with more reports today regarding Sudan potentially becoming the next Arab country to normalize ties with Israel. The Walla news site reports that an announcement of the establishment of diplomatic ties between Sudan and Israel could happen as soon as this weekend, following a reported phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump, Sudan's transitional leader, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. No confirmation from Israel, the U.S., or Sudan on this report. Israel Hayom reported that a high-level Israeli-U.S. delegation flew to Sudan for talks on the matter yesterday. As we reported to you, President Trump said he would remove Sudan from the terrorism list if it followed through with a commitment to pay over $300 million to American terror victims and their families. And U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said yesterday that assuming Sudan does so, he hopes that they then recognize Israel and establish ties, following in the footsteps of the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Israel signed an aviation agreement with Bahrain today for regular passenger flights between the countries, allowing each country up to 14 weekly flights between Tel Aviv and Manama and unlimited flights between the Bahraini capital and the Israeli resort city of Eilat, as well as 5 weekly cargo flights to each country. Prime Minister Netanyahu tweeted, "Each day brings a new breakthrough." As part of the Abraham Accords, he wrote, today's aviation agreement not only opens a direct route between Israel and Bahrain, but also brings Asia and the Pacific closer for Israeli travelers. Another glorious day for peace. Flights are expected to begin as soon as next week. Today's agreement comes just 2 days after an aviation deal signed between Israel and the UAE, signed on the tarmac of Ben Gurion Airport on Tuesday, which allows for up to 112 flights a week between the countries. Well, Jewish groups are once again urging a university not to give a platform to a convicted terrorist. If you recall, last month, San Francisco State University was under fire for hosting convicted Palestinian terrorist Layla Khaled in a Zoom program. And after major efforts, including from many Jewish organizations, Zoom canceled the program on its platform, which was then briefly streamed on YouTube before it cut it short. Khaled was one of the hijackers of TWA Flight 840 from Rome to Tel Aviv in 1969 and in 1970 of an El Al flight from Amsterdam to New York City, both carried out by terror group the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, of which she reportedly remains a member. Well, Khaled tomorrow is set to be hosted at the University of Hawaii in a Zoom event there held by Students for Justice in Palestine at the school, part of a so-called Day of Action against censorship of campus political speech. The leaders of B'nai B'rith International, Charles Kaufman and Daniel Mariashin, sent a letter to the school's president, David Lassner, calling for the cancellation of the event, writing, "Do would-be or actual killers and assassins have anything fundamentally positive to teach students? If you are not able to draw that line," they wrote, "something is terribly askew in how your university sees the very basic definition of morality and the sharing of quote-unquote difficult ideas." Stand With Us CEO Roz Rothstein sent a letter to Zoom CEO Eric Yuan to again ask them to reject the program, refuting that this was a matter of academic freedom. Rothstein wrote, "Terrorists can still speak elsewhere. You simply send the message that they are not welcome on your platform." JNS reports that the United States and Bahrain are expected to sign a memorandum of understanding on combating anti-Semitism. Citing a senior Trump administration official, JNS said the MOU will be between the U.S. State Department and the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence in Bahrain. And Albania is the latest country to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and is the second Muslim-majority country to do so, the first being Kosovo. The Albanian parliament unanimously passed the adoption of the definition today, which includes defining anti-Semitism as the demonization and delegitimization of Israel. Speaker of the parliament, Gramos Rucci, noted that during the Holocaust, Albania was the only country in Europe where no Jews were killed and no Jews were handed over to the Nazis. He said that Albanians now have more reasons to be proud. The IHRA adoption comes just ahead of Albania hosting the first ever Balkans Forum against anti-Semitism in partnership with the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement and the Jewish Agency for Israel, taking place next week. Jewish Agency Chair Isaac Herzog welcomed the Albanian Parliament's decision today, saying that the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is the most important and effective tool currently in place in the international arena to take practical action against the scourge of anti-Semitism. And Estonia has joined the list of countries banning terror group Hezbollah in its entirety. Estonian Foreign Minister Urmas Reinsalu said today that Hezbollah poses a considerable threat to international and thereby Estonian security. The American Jewish Committee, whose ongoing campaign to get the European Union to declare the entirety of Hezbollah terrorist without distinguishing between its political and military wing, welcomed the decision, noting that the EU refused to blacklist the entire group, which allows the Iranian-backed Lebanese-based terror group to continue to operate in many countries in Europe, though the list of countries in the world designating Hezbollah in its entirety as terrorist is growing. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Thursday, October the 22nd. At 7 o'clock, it's Talmud study. At 8 o'clock, the changing nature of the relationship between the U.S. and Europe since the end of World War II is discussed by Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger and Simon Rodan Ben-Zaken at the AJC Global Forum of 2020. At 9, Mark Golub sits down with the widow of legendary baseball player Jackie Robinson, Rachel Robinson, on L'chaim. Then at 10:15, Jewish ball players are in the spotlight. And next, it's ILTV's Insider. And that's the JBS News Update for Thursday, October the 22nd, 2020. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy. Stay well.